we're going to move on to reporting. How can we share stories across an island chain? How many of you have heard of ArcGIS Online? This is a fantastic technology that is free to all K-12 schools in Hawaii. It's made by Esri, the makers of ArcGIS. And ArcGIS is a technology that is used by city planners. If you want to get a job with the county and you know how to use ArcGIS, you got a job. This is a great technology. It's a map-making technology. It's a statistical analysis technology. All of those maps that are coming out of the lava flow on the Big Island are done on ArcGIS. It's a great technology, and this is how you get it. You go to Maui Women in Tech. This is the and it's in your book too, but this is the website. This is what it'll look like when it comes up, and it has a request software. So this is free. They've made this free for every school in the United States. At this point in time in Hawaii, 97 schools are using it. What an underused resource. The great thing about this is that you have to put language arts into it because you have to tell a story. So the kids have to write. And so this is where, like how in Next Generation Science, they've linked language arts into it. This is what that's about. So the thing you can do is you can either request it as a classroom, or even better yet, have your school request it, because then all the teachers can use it. But if your principals and other teachers aren't, you can request it. As an individual teacher, you can request it, and they will send it to you. And they have all kinds of help. I mean, they have all kinds of videos to help teachers get started. They have really cool story maps that you can look at. They give you templates, so you can choose your template of how you want to put it together. They actually have contests. I mean, this is used by professionals. There's a beautiful story map about the refugee movement in Europe, and they included videos in it, and it's an amazing, amazing, beautiful representation of what was happening in Europe as the refugees were coming in, and where then countries were blocking them, and how it was affecting everything. This is a great skill for your kids to be learning. And again, here are all of these different sources that you can go to. You know, short ones, long ones, you know, for teachers, for students. It's really, they really do lead you through it. And I did make an ArcGIS story map about the project that we ran with the school kids. And that is available online too. But again, this shows out of all of this, and Maui, they're using it to track the axis deer. There's a really cool video about how Maui is using this. So they're using this to solve real world problems. And again, that is highly engaging to students, that it's real. It's not some abstract thing that has no connection to where they live. So this is a great way for us to share information, and for you to be able to tell the story of what you found at your garden, what you did at your garden, what worked at your garden, what did your students like. And so this is where I say, when you go out to the garden, give somebody a camera, have somebody take their phone, because you want to collect any kind of, you know, if the kids had some journaling thing about what went on in the garden that day, or they found something very interesting, if they found an interesting picture, you want to be able to include these into your story map to make it really beautiful and informative. The great thing too about them is you can embed links. So this is the story map that I made, and maybe we'll even go online, and I can pull it up online and I'll run you guys through it. But this was a story map. This is published. When you sign up for ArcGIS, you can eventually publish your story map. You can also keep it as a group. So if you want to make a group where we're just all a group, or within your school you're a group, or together like the Hui is a group, or whatever, you can share it that way. And then if you want to publish it, you can publish it. But this was the story map, and this is the link for it, and that is in your book. So this was the map of the 5 partner schools that I used. And so I was able to represent the schools with flags, and then I represented our university here with a white building. If you click on the flags, I embedded each school's website in there. So you click on that and the school's website comes up and it tells you about the school. It's really, really fun and it looks so professional. One of the cool things when we were doing this was the kids from Kapoho, the school down here that's been covered by lava now, we didn't find very many under the traps, ever. I had one student who was not a really academically successful student, but boy was she a good slug hunter. And so the ground was mostly cinder, and they had built kind of rock planters, stacked rock planters, and the slugs liked to go into there. And so our shelters, we really didn't catch very many under our shelters. We caught more by slug hunts, and we did have a big piece of tarp kind of material that we unraveled one day, and there was a lot of them in there. And so I asked my students, I said, why do you think the ground is the way it is? They're like, oh, we don't know, Auntie. And I'm like, well, what's up the road from you? You know, like, what's over there? You know, and it's like, oh, the lava beds. And it's like, well, how did that get there? We don't know. And then I turned them on to the websites. It showed about the 1960 Kapoho flow. That was right there in their yard, and they didn't know about it. You know, and all of a sudden you see these videos of these 1,200-foot fountains of lava and what happened to Kapoho, and the kids are like, "Whoa, Auntie," you know. And so, you can just put so much into it, you know, which is what's really fun. The one thing that we did have a hard time with, and I'm hoping that maybe ArcGIS has gotten better, the pictures that you embed in it have to be loaded to a more public site, and at that point, Facebook was one, and I forget what the other one is, and they've changed it somewhat, and that's where I really want to check with Maui people and say what, you know, for students using this, you know, we don't want to have their pictures in these really, really public sites and that kind of thing. So that's something that I got to see, but the photos do have to be loaded into a different site, and then you can embed them into it. And so this was, you know, we always have the kids, they have to, in this program we had the kids have to work with another class and teach them what they knew about rat lungworm. So these guys made this great puppet out of foam board. It was so fun. And they brought in the little kids. So a lot of times, like if we want to introduce the second grade activity book, we'll have the fifth graders introduce it to the second graders. And they bring the second graders in, they read them the story, and then they give them the book. So that way, again, you know, the kids are communicators, the kids are educators. So you're working in all of those different skills with them. And it just, you know, the more pictures you have, the more fun your story is. Again, you know, this was part of the story map. So each template is different. I used a template where you had a side panel, and that was where all of your verbiage kind of went. And so I had the kids work in teams to write up the panel for that particular page, and that was a great language arts component for them. You know, you can go as deep as you want with this. They can have to do some history studies, some social studies. You know, the more, the better. And then we put pictures of, at each school, of all the different slugs and snails that we captured, and we were able to look at, you know, I wanted to know, how do populations change related to location? You know, so we went from basically the east end of the island up to the north end of the island. We went from sea level up to over 3,000 feet. And I wanted to see, how do population compositions change? That was one question that I was very interested in. So we did see the lower elevation. We never saw the giant African snail up at the mid-elevation schools or at the high elevation schools. We only found a Cuban slug one time up at Kanuoka'aina, which was it was about a 2,500 foot elevation school. Kanuoka'aina, their species were entirely different than all the rest of the schools. And even when these malacologists came over from the mainland, I took them up to that school, and they were all like, this is amazing, everybody's different. It's a totally different population composition. We did see crossovers at our mid-elevation schools. So we would see high elevation and low elevation at our mid-elevation schools. The leopard slug is more of a mid to high elevation. This is Laviculus altae. This was a low to mid elevation. Cuban slug actually went low to fairly high. We never found it up in Volcano, but we did find it one time up in Waimea. Semi-slug seems to be low to mid and may be working its way to high. And these guys, these little, we were calling them Sublima octomas, and they're not. They're the Paropius architulnatian. These guys were low to mid elevation. We found quite a few at mid elevation, but they were low to mid. And then, you know, we recorded how did the kids communicate the message. And my school at the Mountain View was just fantastic. This is a poor farming community. Mountain View is a very rural, poor community. A lot of the kids were on catchment. That was the school where a lot of the kids either knew somebody or had a family member or knew somebody who had gotten rat lungworm. I actually worked at this school. It was the first school that I worked at when I came to Hawaii, and it was a poor performing school. This is not a really academically successful school. And they had a kumu for the school garden that was just outrageous. She was great. She was just so great. She took this and it, you know, because this is really an important issue for Hawaii. It's a real important issue. It affects health, it affects tourism, it affects agriculture. This is real. And so it's so empowering. And she became the resource for her community. People would ask her, what do I do? What do I do? And so, you know, she really took this to heart, and her kids really took this to heart. And so they were the ones who came up with let's make a t-shirt. And so this was Snuggles, because we were calling the shelters Snugglers to kind of make it more friendly. You know, slugs, snails, shelters, we jammed it all together. So they came up with this design, snuggle and juggle your slugs away. And I did a lot of art back in my early life. I know how to do silk screens. We did this shirt and that kind of thing. So we made the silk screen and we ran the shirts there at the school. They took, you know, they took their school shirts and put it on the back, and it was really fun. Some kids made posters, and we tell them, you know, you're the educator for your community. What is your community? Define your community. Well, your community could be your school. You know, you should inform your school. If you're a 5th grader and you're working on this, it's your job to tell the school about it. You know, this is the level, and these kids like that responsibility. It made them feel really important because they were really important. You know, and then you expand your community. Well, what else? You know, if we expand our community, who is that? That's your family, you know. That's your immediate family, and then you expand that. Well, that's your expanded family, you know. And as you get into the upper grades, and this is what we're going to probably do up in Waimea, how do you then inform your larger community? How do you inform the town you live in? You know, and for us over on Hawaii Island, where it's very rural, this has been a problem. This was a real problem for the health department. They just kind of said, we don't know how to do this because it's rural and people speak different languages and they have locked gates and barking dogs and we don't know. And it's like, tell the kids, you know, because, you know, you have kids living in all the way up to Kau, you know, and all the way down to Keao. That's a big difference. So, you know, that kid can go and teach Kau. And so if you look at Hawaii Island, and I did this with one of my maps, you know, you look at the radius and you can expand your radius and you can see the reach that your program would have. And looking at where your students are from, we could see that in a very short time, we could educate all of Hawaii Island by working through the school garden projects. So be thinking about that too when you're measuring change, you know, when you're collecting data. How are we measuring social and cultural change? And then I always have the kids work in teams. To me, teamwork is really fun. It's a really important thing for kids to learn. There's a lot of, like, you know, a story map and having them have to write it up. At my school in Kapoho, the kids had a lot of language problems. They were pretty far behind in language arts, and they really struggled with this. But you get them to work in teams and they can help each other. And I really love to see what happens when kids work in teams. You know, it's just so much more fun. one kid might know something that they can help another one with and that kind of thing. So almost all of my lessons in the activities, you'll see the kids working in teams.